Lead off? All right.
You go for it.
Live and back in action after a hiatus. We may or may not have been living in our parents' basements, just watching hockey and stating out numbers the whole time. But hey, we like to embrace that culture. Marcus, the Puckleheads, we're back East Coast to West Coast. Stanley Cup Finals.
A long time coming.
A long time coming. Conall was speaking third person here, was in his basement, very upset about the Rangers losing to a trash Ottawa Senators team, but that's a hot take. It's a hot take for another day. Stanley Cup Finals, Marcus. Game 1 last night. One of the most bizarre hockey games. I think maybe the most bizarre hockey game I've ever watched in my life. The Penguins going 37 minutes without a shot on goal. Did they come out on top of the W, Marcus?
Yeah, the weirdest game I think I've ever seen. I wrote a satirical column today on Fear the Fin, which I highly recommend people check out. That because you're and it was a satire of the takes that we're already seeing, like, oh, Pittsburgh just knows how to win. Like, took it a logical step further by saying like that they weren't lucky, like they made their own luck. Every cliche that a hacky sports writer would use. Yeah, it was a weird game though. Nashville got down. I never thought they were playing that poorly, even as they did get down. We thought they were taking the lead, if not for the overturned goal on the offside call, which how they were able to tell whether or not Philip Forsberg's back foot was in the air or on the ice with some of the zoomed in grainy angles I saw. I can't imagine the NHL has, high definition cameras that like can zoom into an inch basically. And I thought that, that changed the game. It's a different game if that goal is allowed, but Nashville still came back. And then, nearly 40 minutes, Pittsburgh goes without a shot. And then Jake Gensel scores, on a, I would say not a great defensive play from Roman Josi on that zone entry. Kind of left Ryan Ellis out to dry.
I thought he gave him the zone a little bit too easily, especially it was essentially a 1-on-2. Now, it was a good shot by Gensel, in stride, good looks, good for him, but I thought he was just given a little bit too much time and space to make a play.
By Ellis or by Josi on the zone entry?
I was thinking probably a little bit of both, but Ellis even backed off when he was able to take the shot.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty poor coverage. I think I forget who passed to Gensel, but Josi really didn't inhibit the guy's ability to get into the zone. And there was a great article from Tyler Dello yesterday on The Athletic, which I recommend everybody check out. Normally those articles are behind a paywall, but this one's free. And basically, against Josi, a lot of players are getting into the actually, I'm mixing up articles. This was actually on Sportsnet, so you can read it for free. Looking at dump in percentage and controlled zone entries, and guys are able to get the zone on Josi, and that's what we saw on that last goal. But even with that, Nashville played really well. I picked the Predators in 6 going into this series. You had the Penguins in 7. Do you feel any more or less confident in your pick, or was game 1 so weird that you really nothing's changed?
Yeah, that's the latter there, Marcus, more than the former. I think it was just such a bizarre game. In every aspect of the word, the Predators dominated the game, yet the Penguins come out with a W. And at this point in the season, that's really the only thing that should matter. So, first off, let's all be noted, folks, that I'm wearing a PK Subban shirt right now, so I'm absolutely rooting for the Predators.
Yeah, I was tempted to lead off the show by calling it the PK Subban Appreciation Hour. We make our biases clear on this one.
Yeah, exactly. I said my biggest reason for picking the Penguins was the center depth. As goaltending, you give the edge to Pecorino going into the series. However, that was not the case last night at all. Ryan Murray just continuing Matt Murray, excuse me, just completely just blowing my mind with this. Marcus, he has a chance to win 2 Stanley Cups as a rookie. Think about that for a second. That's actually virtually impossible because of when he came in and took his rookie status hit into effect, but kind of a crazy stat there. That being said, you don't lose a series till you're out of it. You lose a home game. I think Predators are fine. They should have won game 1. I wouldn't surprise me at all for them to win game 2. I just like the center depth a little bit more with Pittsburgh. It just makes a little more sense. If they had Johansson, I'd be all on board with the Predators, but If the Predators won this series in 6 games, it wouldn't surprise me. Although, winning 4 of the next 5 against a Pittsburgh team will be tough. But if every game goes like last night, the Predators can win this series in 5.
I think last night was really the first. As weird as it was, we got the opening salvo of attrition really in the Stanley Cup Final, and the two diametrically opposed approaches of you have, because of both teams' injuries, you have a team with incredible top 2 centermen, and then countering that you have arguably the 2 best pairings on any team in the Stanley Cup Final this postseason with PK Subban and Matthias Ekholm, and then Roman Josi and Ryan Ellis taking, whoever doesn't get the tough assignments, and Subban and Ekholm have really drawn a lot of the tough assignments this postseason and have been really good. So, it's been a little confusing for me to, bias aside, to see, it seems like in the media, there's more of a push for Josi to get the Conn Smythe because of those scoring numbers rather than Subban, even though I think Rene's the Conn Smythe candidate for Nashville at this point, even with that poor effort in game 1, just as Malkin is, I think, the clear front runner for Pittsburgh on the other side.
He's been great. Man.
He was great again last night. I mean, that goal he scored, Rene would probably want back, but Malkin's a good player, and he's showing it this postseason, really making some of those, actually, the Penguins would be better if they traded Evgeny Malkin and got worse takes look especially bad. But it's been interesting, and I think even though last night, dare I say, their top 2 pairs had the edge over Crosby and Malkin. I mean, Pittsburgh did a lot of their damage on the power play last night, and I think at even strength that game was really in Nashville's control. I was surprised how much it was in control because, as you mentioned, the absence of Ryan Johansson and his nose, is as we were talking about before the show.
Party, he's still partying.
He has more license to party now that he's hurt.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Less liability.
Less liability. Yeah, I was surprised to see that level of dominance. I still think it's going to be a longer series rather than a short one. I think Pittsburgh will be better, but I don't think they can sustain it. But that being said, they did it against Washington. This is how they won the series. They got outshot, outpossessed, and did not control play in pretty much every game up until game 7, really, I thought, when they came out in that third period and the Washington just did not assert themselves and could have used Philip Forsberg, who's currently lighting it up for the Nashville Predators. One of the worst trades I think we've ever seen. So, yeah, this series is in a weird place already, but I'm very excited that it already is in a weird place. And even if Nashville doesn't win game 1 or 2, Conall, until they lose at home, they're still in a position to advance and not advance, but to win the series. As long as they hold serve at Bridgestone, they're in great shape.
Marcus, is it safe to say that Pittsburgh is catfishing the other opponents right now?
I don't think they're catfishing them necessarily because they are showing up. They're not. How do I put it? They're not ghosting them. They're not like saying, "Hey, let's meet up." Well, actually, no. Maybe they are because they really didn't show up last night. But
that's right. At least in game 1 they got catfished. I mean, Pittsburgh
still managed to have the upper hand. Like Nashville put in all the effort last night, and Pittsburgh catfished them and came out on top. That's an excellent analogy there.
I mean, yeah. Even
the more I thought about it,
even Neve and Max would have been baffled about last night. You know what I mean?
They would have been very confused.
They've seen it all. So I'm with you, Marcus. I think it should be still a fun series to go here. Getting into the catfish, let's go. Let's have a little bit of fun with this here, Marcus. So the guy, if you don't know, folks, so I know the catfish has become a tradition to throw on the ice in Nashville. It actually started years ago in response to the Red Wings in the playoffs, and the Red Wings fans with their octopus tradition that's been going on since I believe the late 40s. And so they decided, we're going to have our own thing. Started throwing catfish on the ice. Catfish, a local eat there in Nashville. And hopefully everybody enjoys it. I enjoy catfish once in a while, Marcus. I don't know about you.
I haven't had it in a while.
It's a good. I'm a fish guy to begin with. So you know what? Listen, I'll be in Nashville on Thursday, Marcus. Maybe I'll have a catfish meal, a little superstition going, and maybe, just maybe, I'll sneak a catfish into Bridgestone Arena and have to throw one down there. That could be a fun time. We'll see what happens. No promises yet. We'll see how much liquid courage I have beforehand. But Anyway, guy first off, he brought it from Tennessee. He didn't even buy it in Pittsburgh. Vacuum sealed it, snuck it in his shorts, and he threw it on the ice during the game last night. Evidently, Ryan Ellis scored very shortly after, and Pittsburgh really started to take the blunt of the hits there as Nashville finally started breaking through. The guy was originally kicked out. Okay, fair. You kick the guy out. You got to do what you got to do. But now he's being charged with a disruption of a meeting, using a crime using a weapon. They're claiming the
we've got to practice journalistic responsibility here. So let me get the official.
Bring it up. He's getting charged with like 3 different counts and is facing some serious jail time for throwing a catfish on the ice during a hockey game. This is the first here, folks. So I'm very curious. So yeah, I want to see how Nashville.
Disorderly conduct,
okay,
disrupting a meeting, and possession of an instrument of crime.
Instrument of crime. That was the wording. First time a fish might be used as an instrument of crime, Marcus. Now, apparently the bar in Nashville, Losers, if you've been in Nashville, there's losers and winners. They're like sister bars next to each other, is going to put up the money to pay for this guy. And there's actually a petition, or pay for his crimes, or fines, whatever he may have. And there's actually a petition, Marcus, to have this guy lead the rally towel waving in Game 3 at home on Saturday nights.
And he could get pardoned. There's a pending resolution from the Allegheny County I think it's the Allegheny County Metro Council. I believe I'm saying it right. A couple counts of it are drafting a resolution to request a pardon for him. So he may not face the the long arm of justice in
Fight
Pittsburgh.
The power. Throw those.
As one of them said, this is Freddie O'Connell said this. He's a city councilman.
Great last name.
He said, "This is fandom. If we're really going to escalate this to the point where people having some fun in a sports arena and a little prank becomes a serious charge and carries with it a fine, maybe it's time to de-escalate that and let fans be fans." Yeah, I think it's harmless. Like,
listen, I get it. If you're really angry and you want to throw the guy out, I'm not.
But don't arrest the guy.
Yeah, charge him with come on, like, yeah, really, like, you delayed the game for 15 seconds as they get the catfish off. I understand it's in Pittsburgh, so you don't want like that. But I mean, Marcus, we've seen this everywhere. It's a weird tradition. I mean, it's been going on, and true story. This was years ago. I was at a Red Wing Ranger game at Madison Square Garden. I want to say this was 2003 or 4, so I was young. And an octopus was thrown on the ice by a Red Wing fan in Madison Square Garden. I've seen it happen before. I don't know the repercussions of this, but clearly the guy didn't get arrested or something. I would have heard about it even then. We've seen the rats in Florida over the years. There's a million traditions. Hell, Marcus, what about hat tricks, for God's sakes? I mean, even I've been, away arenas. I was in Buffalo to see Brad Richards get a hat trick, and there was Ranger fans throwing hats on the ice.
My thing about this is like, was this same level of concern raised when they played the Detroit Red Wings 2 years in a row in the Stanley Cup Final? Like, if someone was going to bring in an octopus on the ice, I don't know. I haven't done that research, but if it hasn't been if charges weren't brought against someone who did that then, if they did that then, why would you do it now? I think it's very, it's very protectionist. It's very like, I think it's funny when the markets are like, hey, show us a state ID. If you're from Tennessee.
Oh, that was funny. I thought that was good.
Realistically, they wouldn't actually do that, like, because, they'd be discriminating against their potential, business. And it was having some fun. This is just like, it didn't do anything to disrupt the game. If you want to kick the guy out of the game, fine. But I don't think you can then proceed to charge him. That's just a waste of county resources too. Are the taxpayers of Pittsburgh really paying taxes so they can charge a guy who threw a catfish on the ice? Like, I would not be happy if my taxpayer money was going towards that personally. Like, I think that's ridiculous.
I'll play devil's advocate here for a second, Marcus. Where does the line get drawn there from the catfish and then, for the idiots who are going to throw, a beer bottle or a hot dog down on the ice?
Well, that's different. I think that's different.
Okay.
I think throwing, they showed like the E60 piece on PK Subban, which we'll probably talk about after this catfish incident. He was in Boston after they just scored a game-winning goal for Montreal, and people were throwing water bottles and food at him, and like that, to me, that crosses a line. Throwing it on the ice in general, away from a crowd, like with that octopus tradition in Detroit, I think that's very different than someone throwing a beer bottle.
Yeah, I would agree, especially if you're going to allow it. Allow it at home. The only reason it was because it was an away game. That's the only reason this was an issue. Like you said, it's allowed in Nashville for the most part. We've seen,
And I don't recall them being this mad if Red Wings fans have done that, which Red Wings fans I'm almost certain have done that there.
From firsthand experience, I've seen a Red Wing fan do it at Madison Square Garden. So I was.
You want to know my hot take on it? It's because it's a young franchise, relatively young franchise from a place that's not a quote unquote traditional hockey market. The tradition doesn't go back to the 40s like the Octopus. And, there's this, we've seen it in the coverage of, actually, all this hypocritical coverage. Greg Wyshynski pointed it out very well on Puck Daddy. The same writers that are saying Nashville is a legitimate hockey market are the same ones 10 years ago that were like begging for the team to move to Hamilton, Ontario. The same exact writers. So I think this is my hot take on it. I think some of that comes there. It's like, some of that is, hey, we're the Penguins. This is Pittsburgh. We've won cups. You're Nashville. What have you done? If it was a Red Wings fan in a cup final or a playoff game throwing an octopus on the ice, I don't think they would bring the same.
I happen to agree. I really happen to agree. And so, you know what? Go Preds. Enjoy your, a raucous crowd there in Nashville. I'm looking forward to it. We talked a little bit on it here, Marcus, and I think it was great. And Marcus, it really made me think about the talk we had with our good friend Ian Prescott a few months back. And folks, maybe we'll tweet that out later on if you haven't watched that. The PK Subban E60 on ESPN. ESPN doesn't do much right these days, but I do enjoy their E60s. I enjoy the 30 for 30s. I think they do a fantastic job with both of those. Marcus, did you get a chance to watch it?
I did watch the Subban piece. I got a chance to watch that Sunday afternoon. A lot of interesting things emerging from that. Some interesting comments. The John Scott comments have obviously picked up a little bit, but almost as funny was I love the bite with Jaromir Jagr in the piece because all he says is, yeah, he's great. Like he says nothing else of substance except he's great. And Scott's and he's gone into it. He said that interview was from 2 years ago.
Roughly 2 years ago. Yeah.
I feel like, just seeing where the interview took place, like, unless they both came to town or something, I feel like that might have been taped at the All-Star game.
I'm pretty sure it was at the All-Star game.
Okay. Because that's what, it was the same backdrop, the same room. You should watch. I didn't, there was a lot I learned about in that piece, but, in that piece, John Scott says, I think he's a piece of garbage. I don't like him on the ice. He's basically says he's a hot shot. And I wrote about it on Fear the Thin, said that, ironically enough, John Scott was embracing the same arguments and the same forces that kept him out of the All-Star game in the first place. He was embracing that kind of reasoning by calling PK Subban a piece of garbage. And it's hypocritical. This guy has been suspended multiple times for things he did on the ice. Like, I don't think he's in a position to call anyone that. And, you mentioned it brings us up discussion with Ian. And I think a lot of that hypocrisy, whether conscious or not, I think is racially driven. Mike Milbury called him a clown, and Mike Milbury literally climbed the boards, went into the stands and beat a fan up with a shoe. He did that. But and I don't want to get into even deeper societal things, about crime and punishment for how that affects, white people as opposed to people of color. But it just, I think that piece did a really good job. And even though Subban said he doesn't want to be seen as a black hockey player, he just wants to be seen as a hockey player, I thought the piece did a really good job of kind of highlighting what he deals with as the league's biggest black star in a predominantly white sport.
Well, and Kevin Weeks touched about it. He is truly the first superstar of color in the National Hockey League.
Would you say, what about Jerome Iginla? To play devil's advocate, would you say, I don't think Iginla has the same reach that Subban has had. I
don't think he does either. I think, and I'm going to give you two reasons why, Marcus. One is PK Subban's personality. Let's start with that. Right. He's we've talked about it before. He's flamboyant. He's outspoken at the same time. He's well spoken, but he's a funny guy. He likes the limelight. I also will say that starting his career in Montreal rather than playing in Calgary in the Western Canada realm had also a huge being in basically the heart of hockey, if you will. No insult to Toronto. Let's be honest here. The heart of hockey.
The two cities that drive the conversation of the sport in Canada are Toronto and Montreal.
And he is born outside of Toronto, and he plays in Montreal. I mean, boom. It's the perfect setup. So I think those both impacted there. No disrespect to Jerome McGinley, who is a future Hall of Famer and had some fantastic years for Calgary. I just think we're talking superstar. I think superstar goes – to me, a star is a guy who's a fantastic guy. I think a true superstar goes beyond the realm of the sport a little bit, and that's what PK Subban does. That's what Sidney Crosby does in some aspects. That's what maybe Ovechkin does in some aspects. So guys
certainly
like that,
the cross sport appeal, like casual fan.
I think that's kind of like superstardom, almost celebrity-esque. And you know what? And if we've seen anything, and hockey's my sport to the day I die. But the reason and I'm not a big basketball fan. The reason NBA basketball is so successful is because of its star power. Yeah. Plain and simple. There are players bigger than the league, and in some aspects that's great, and maybe others it's not. But when you're able to sell every little kid running around in a Steph Curry or LeBron James jersey or KD or whoever, John Wall, whoever you want it to be, these kids look up to him because they look up to the star. They love the players. Yeah, he has that sex appeal. This E16 did a great job of that. And I liked how they had both sides of the arguments. They had people who didn't like him in there, which they did a good job. And then they had people who loved him. Right. I mean, it was very well done. And PK is such a funny guy. Anything he does is did you have, and I don't know if anybody saw it. I hope you saw it too. Yeah. He ended his media interview early so then he could go interview his friend. I mean, listen, call him attention whore if you want. You could call him, of course he does. But you know what? He's branding himself, and he's a smart.
But the league needs that. Like
his comment, when he said if every NHL player was quiet and the same as boring, that's boring. It couldn't be more accurate. Come on,
it's completely accurate. And I think a lot of it is it's the team first. And I think I think interesting article, I believe it was on the Shadow League. They basically laid out that the backlash to Subban is racially driven. It's culturally driven, and meaning the culture of hockey, but it's also age. It's people, that have quote unquote played the game, and people who are of an older mindset, like Don Cherry's ripping him. But the fact that ESPN's doing a story on him in the first place, on their signature, on their equivalent of 60 minutes.
Think about that for a second though, right? Because I thought about ESPN, which just fired 90% of its hockey staff. Going into the Stanley Cup Finals, who's the one player they chose to focus on? The one guy. Yeah. The one, what? And as stupid as a pain in the ass as ESPN may be, they're clearly smart when they know how to brand themselves to put a guy like that out into the limelight. When
there's always top notch. They know what's newsworthy. Like they recognize that he's newsworthy and he warrants coverage. And I think you've seen subtly the NHL start to get that this postseason. When they tweet about the game coming up that night, PK Subban is the one featured in the Twitter images. I was watching the Premier League. Who was on the promo during the Premier League to promote that one of the playoff games was coming up? It was PK Subban was on the full screen. Those people get it. And I think the NHL is starting to get it too. Fortunate about the pushback is that it's the people within the sport, the players, coaches, and then the establishment media types who just spout what scouts tell them all the time as if it's, the gospel and as if it's dogma. They're the ones that are pushing back against Subban. I mean, we saw it when he went back to Montreal, man. Like, look at the ovation they gave him. Like, they get it. Like, I think a majority of fans get it. I just think there's a minority of fans, and there's also a back from the quote unquote gatekeepers in the sport. So, players, coaches, it's just fascinating to me. And there's a player that's a lot like PK Subban out in San Jose, and Brent Burns, and maybe it's because he plays in San Jose and not Montreal, but he does a lot of the same stuff. And if anything, what he does is presented as a positive and not as a negative.
Yeah, it's all it comes down to the off-ice distractions and who's doing what. But we all love PK here, and I think that's pretty obvious. And if anybody's got a chance, just from a public image and kind of a cultural insight, I think it's a cool thing to read, especially both of his parents being immigrants coming to Canada.
a Habs fan growing up.
I know. Yeah, that's so. It's just
his dad grew up in a French-speaking neighborhood, so his dad was a Habs fan, and Subban was a Canadiens fan. I'm like, are you? His childhood team did that to him. Like,
yeah, I know.
Gut wrenching.
It's remarkable. It's remarkable. Marcus, we did just get a question here on Twitter from a good friend of mine, Mike Cosentino, asking, I believe it was who he thought the best player. Let me double check on the question here. Besides Sidney Crosby, who's the best player in the Stanley Cup Finals? I think we could answer.
I'd say PK or Malkin.
I was going to say, I think it's probably a toss-up between, for me, it's PK Subban or Evgeny Malkin. I've said this for years about Evgeny Malkin having a great chance to watch the Penguins terrorize the Rangers for a long time. There are games where I watch Evgeny Malkin, and I actually think he's better than Sidney Crosby. That is how much respect and talent I think, respect to give to Evgeny Malkin and how much talent. And, he first off, he's bigger than Crosby is. He's probably, in that aspect, physically a little bit stronger and whatnot. And sometimes you see Evgeny Malkin play, and when he gets his legs going, it's I would say the two guys he reminds me of back in his prime, are Eric Lindros and then making the Pittsburgh comparison, he's probably closer to Mario than Sidney is. And as far as physical attributes and skill and size, Crosby, obviously smaller, honestly, probably more in connection if you want to go back to that area to a Gretzky type, more of a playmaker kind of guy. But yeah, for me, it's either Evgeny Malkin or PK Subban. And if he could play up to the level he's been playing, maybe it could be Pekka Rinne, but we certainly didn't see that in Game 1, Marcus.
Yeah, I think it's clear as day. I think it's Malkin or PK. I mentioned those articles. Highly recommend reading. I retweeted them yesterday, so you can find them there. One from Tyler Dello, one on Filipovic, that can say that just lays out how good PK Subban's been for Nashville and how Peter Laviolette's used him. But yeah, I agree with you on Malkin. I think Lindros and Lemieux are really good comps. Other player, I think, much like Subban deals with some bias because he's black, I think Malkin probably doesn't get the respect he deserves because he's Russian, and there's definitely an element of xenophobia in the league that, even a player like Phil Kessel gets just because he's not Canadian, because he's American. I think if Phil Kessel was a Canadian boy, I don't think he has the same reputation that he does, having gone to, the University of Minnesota and come up to the U.S. program. I think Malkin's also a really smart player, and I don't think he gets enough credit for that. I think his hockey IQ, you basically have at any given point with him or Crosby on the ice, the smartest player on the ice at any time. He can play with anybody. He's played with Sid before. He can center his own line. I actually thought when they acquired Kessel that Kessel was going to be a better fit on Malkin's line than Crosby's line, given that the style the two of them play. And he's had very quietly, a really, really good year, an MVP type season. And then this postseason, I think he's been it makes it even more ridiculous. The NHL's top 100 player list that a guy like Evgeny Malkin's not on, and a guy like Jonathan Taves.
We could do like a 4-hour special on the NHL top 100 player list, and I think I'd still just be angry.
We could do a 4-hour special on how overrated Jonathan Taves is.
Well, absolutely could. Marcus, bringing up, speaking of Russian player biases, just some other news in the hockey world here. Somehow, some way, the idea is now being flirted out there that Alex Ovechkin should be traded by the Capitals. Now it's came out and said it. I'm gonna find the exact quote just so I once again have our journalism bias make sure we're correct here. But could you even fathom that possibility if you're the Washington Capitals, Marcus? Could you even rationalize that concept?
Yeah, I think that's a strange reality to be presented with. Did not expect to read that headline. It's an interesting dichotomy between him and Sid's careers. They're going to be forever intertwined. I think Ovechkin was clearly playing hurt this postseason. I think it was obvious to me. I think we watched that Toronto game when he injured his knee, and we thought there was no way he'd be coming back. When I remember we were sitting together. We watched the replay of that injury. We thought there was no way he'd play again that postseason, and he came back that same game. I think if there's a time to explore it, it's probably now. I think if you're a GM and you're not doing your due diligence and seeing what the market is for a player, but I think that the Caps GM certainly gave enough qualifications to that statement to make it seem like that they're really not exploring it. But then again, stranger things have happened. Mark Bergevin said he wasn't shopping PK Subban, although in hindsight, I think we never really had much reason to believe that. I think until we see a guy like, until we see a report independent of the GM answering that question, I'd be hesitant to even give it much thought, because he's signed for so long and he's still really, really good. His down year this year, he still had 30 goals. He still had 33 goals. So, I would not. They're going to have to make some tough decisions. Maybe. But I can't even. Yeah, I'm at a loss for words, because I don't think this is a possibility.
Yeah, the exact quote here from GM Brian McClellan here. Marcus, I got the quote. This is with this per Stephen Wino of the Associated Press. Excuse me. This is off of NBC Sports. But he's a big part of our franchise, a big part of our history. He's been a big part from where we are at as an organization. And just to casually say, let's trade him for what? For who? I don't think it makes sense from an organizational point of view. Maybe at some point if there's a legitimate hockey deal that comes available, but I don't know that that's where we're at right now. I just think he's part of the history here. He's a big part of the franchise, and he'll continue to be going forward. So, it's an idea thrown out there. Everyone has their hot takes. Listen, we just talked about it. The Caps are the better team in that series against the Penguins. Unfortunately, as we talked about before the show, Holtby probably had his worst ever series as a starting goal.
And I think the third period of Game 7 was inexcusable.
That's a joke. That was awful.
They were playing. I thought they were going to tie the game. They were playing very well going into the third period, and then they came out in the third and they were awful. I was in shock sitting there. I was at how bad they were.
Yeah, it was terrible.
I think but we saw it last summer. I never thought Shea Weber would get traded, but you have the opportunity to get PK Subban, you're going to trade Shea Weber. So I think, and that's, if you're going to trade Ovechkin, you're going to have to get an elite winger, a young in his prime elite winger on the way. Like when he says a hockey trade, I think that's what he means.
Yeah, you don't see, it'd be tough even to just as much as good as, trading Ovechkin for, 2 first-round picks and a prospect, or something like that. I don't think that's what he'll.
It's going to be like a straight swap of like Johnny Gaudreau for Alex Ovechkin.
Yeah. Ovechkin still got 4 years with a little bit north of 9.5. I believe with 9.2.
He's only signed for 4 more years?
It's only 4 years. Isn't that crazy that how fast that contract went?
Wow, that's nuts.
2017, we're old now.
And that's a deal too. I think when it was signed, like a lot of these long-term deals, people are like, ugh, like they're not going to age well. That was one when it was signed. Everyone's like, yeah, no, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, he's like still pretty young. Yeah, that will work. He's 33 right now, I believe. 32, 33, right in there. Yeah.
They're going to get some of the decline years here, but they're even with, a lot of the impending free agents, they're in a good enough position organizationally. They'd be better if they had Philip Forsberg.
Oh, he's only 31. Excuse me. I'm adding.
But, with Burakovsky developing, with Kuznetsov developing, I think they're in a good spot where Ovechkin can kind of take a step back offensively and have those guys, carry more of the load. I thought Burakovsky was great in that.
He's a good player.
He's
Burakovsky.
If they had Forsberg, man. If they had Forsberg.
Someone tweeted out last night after that offsides was called that Martin Erat would have stayed onside. It was a joke. It wasn't a serious tweet, but I got a good like cackle out of that. I thought it was pretty hilarious.
So you've got the Pens in 7. I've got the Preds in 6. This is an interesting series, I think, and I kind of want to touch on it. It's a part of the title of the show, in that Sidney Crosby and LeBron James are in the finals at the in their series respective, their sports respective last series at the same time. Yet I feel like the questions surrounding Crosby are different than the ones surrounding LeBron, and maybe that's because of the nature of the sport. But I think there's been some effort to frame this finals for LeBron as, if he wins this, he's the greatest ever. Even though you and I both agree he's already the greatest ever. Like
never for 5 years, but yeah, go ahead.
Everything's gravy at this point. With Crosby, I don't feel like we're getting that same kind of discussion going into this. Like, we're not getting a discussion that, oh, this is going to seal his legacy, or this is his, his chance to move into the upper echelon. Why do you think that is? Is it because it's already accepted how great he is? Because I remember a few short years ago, people were already like, it was a dumb take, but there were takes from, some establishment hockey media types that Jonathan Taves was the best player in the world, or Drew Doughty was the best player in the world, just because Crosby wasn't going deep in the playoffs. It's just interesting to me. Why do you think the discussion around them is so different?
I think basketball has become so individualized, Marcus. I think that's such a debate. I also think I know basketball has changed too, but I think it's, for my money, at least if you're comparing to Michael Jordan, who's the obvious comparison with LeBron James, the eras they played in aren't astronomically different when you look at
even with the increased 3-point shooting.
I agree. 3-point shooting, even with the how they call the fouls now, the scoring of the early 80s into the mid 80s when Gretzky, that is so astronomically different. If you pick, 1980, even if you want to go 87, fine. You want to go 30 years difference there. Hockey has changed so much. I think it's easier to maybe compare in basketball. I also, once again, think it's such a stats-driven sport and such a individual, the isolation. It's, as we've seen in basketball, as long as you have, two of the best, two best players.
Whoever has more of the three best players.
Three best players, and that's pretty much it. Yeah. Hockey's always been a little bit more of a team game. I think there's a little bit more that goes into it, especially with the aspect of goaltending as well. It makes it a little bit different how the scoring is. And I think it's, in a weird way, it's kind of just socially accepted that no one's ever going to get near Gretzky.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of thing, while LeBron's been flirting with, MJ comparison since he was a little, basically he was 16 years old. So it's different, I think, in that aspects. And I also think, once again, it's a star-driven league versus the old boys of the NHL who want to keep it about the team and, the sport and all that stuff.
I think it's just kind of, to me, and it's such an interesting inflection because, they're both, they're drafted within 2 years of each other. They're both considered the, quote unquote saviors in their respective, sports at the time they were drafted, and both considered the next ones in their sport. And, I don't know. I never watched Gretzky play really up until the end of his career. And I think that's a bad example, but I think you hit the nail on the head in that it's so different and so hard to compare. Crosby would have gone against way worse goaltending if he played in the 80s, but he also wouldn't have had the benefit of, composite sticks and some of the advances in technology. Although I would argue that that is offset by the fact that he would have been playing against goaltenders from the 1980s.
Well, my take. No one knew how to play goalie until 1990-ish. So
until Hasek,
with the exception of Vladislav Tretiak, until Patrick Waugh came into the league, no one knew how to play goalie. So
yeah, and I think it's interesting. It's just interesting to me, and I think it is because of hockey's. It's more team driven, but I still think it's an interesting conversation. I think I don't necessarily think that if he wins, that Crosby's status in the game changes. I think if anything, he's just more accepted that he's already, at this, especially after last year. If they had lost to San Jose, maybe we'd be talking about it differently. But I think it's just accepted at this point that, okay, Sidney Crosby is one of the 5 greatest players of all time. And, frankly, it's a shame. I think the gap would have been closer if he hadn't missed so much time with injury.
Oh, yeah, his stats, you could probably...
And a year lost to a lockout.
I know, you could add
half a year lost to a lockout.
If you add all that up, it wouldn't be crazy to say he could have easily, even if he played, 70 games in those seasons where he was hurt, 75 games. You could easily add 200 plus points to his point total. Maybe 300 to how good he was. Especially think of 2010-11 where he was just shredding going into that year before that injury. I think it really has to do with the league and the perception of greatness. It's always been a team game. Not that basketball isn't, but it's always been basketball's been a much more star-driven league than the NHL always has been, than the NHL ever has been. Even when you had a Gretzky or you have an Ovechkin or a Crosby like today. So I think that is a big part of it, and it's just kind of the culture of both sports to kind of almost hate to say it, but the NHL minimalize the individual efforts.
I agree with that.
compared to basketball, where it's all about being the individual hero, who's the guy who put the team on his shoulders.
I think that's a pretty substantial difference. I think that the minimizing of the individual, we see that in that Crosby's not praised more. Whereas in basketball, I think, they, and it's to a personal, decision and how you, want to see your sports portrayed. But I don't know. I think, the stars are the ones who put butts in the seats, I think ultimately. And I think it's worked. So you look at the growth the NBA's gone on and how popular they are with young people, specifically our age and younger, and how, they're in as good of a position as any sport in the world, and certainly in the United States, to grow. And I think it's an interesting difference, and specifically centering it on LeBron and Crosby, because I think they're both, I tweeted this the other day. It's pretty nuts that we're living in a time where LeBron James, Mike Trout before his injury, Sidney Crosby, and Lionel Messi are all like at the peak of their powers. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to look back on this in 20 years like, wow, like how lucky were we that, at the same time, all these guys were doing this, yet Crosby and LeBron are talked about so differently. And I think because the individual achievement is minimized, that once those achievements are made, it's not questioned anymore. Oh, okay, they're an all-time great, especially when they've won. If they haven't won, I think that's where you get some of the questioning, the Joe Thorntons of the world, or, is Joe Thornton actually a good hockey player because he hasn't won in the, 10% of games in his career in the postseason? Here's my 1,000-word column about it, that kind of a thing. Whereas I think in basketball, and I think especially in basketball, because it's recognized how hard it can be to win when you don't have that individual talent, that, individual greats that didn't win, I think, are remembered more fondly. Guys like Dominique Wilkins, Charles Barkley, basically everybody that went against Michael Jordan in the 90s.
Pretty much. I cut out 1985 to 2000, and every player in that era, not named Michael Jordan, pretty much, got screwed.
Yeah, exactly. And even though everyone recognizes that, and they're remembered more fondly. Whereas I think in hockey,
Patrick Ewing, yeah.
Ewing's another great example. Whereas in hockey, if you don't win, and again, it goes back to the individual versus the team, the lack of team success, and you and I have talked about this, is then an individual indictment on you.
Well, hockey is always quick to criticize the individual, but then to reward the individual is a much different scenario.
Yeah, agreed. And they'll reward the individual for team success. Like we've talked about, like Jonathan Taves is a perfect example of a guy whose reputation is where it is because of what his team has done and not necessarily what he's done.
Like I always like the concept of like, who's like the greatest, playoff player. I always think of a guy, and listen, he's a Hall of Famer, had a great career. Glenn Anderson is a guy I think of, and I don't know if you know the career of Glenn Anderson. Glenn Anderson comes back as a Ranger alumni. Glenn Anderson played 13 or 14 regular season games as a Ranger. He was a role player on the 94 team that won the Cup. But hey, he won the Cup, so bring him back. Yeah. Let's go, boys.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. He's a winner, Marcus, rather than like a guy like Brad Park, who is arguably, he's top 100 greatest players of all time. Like, unfortunately, can never get over the top with the Rangers, or Roger Bear, and so, but Brad Park's a better example. Was statistically one of the best Rangers to ever put on the uniform.
Right. And
then because he never won a cup with them, and then he got traded, like he's kind of not treated in the same light, which is mind blowing. It's once again, it comes back to the argument. If championships are everything, then Trent Dilfer is a better quarterback than Dan Marino. You know what I mean? It's just Brad Johnson's a better Dan Marino, who maybe is the greatest quarterback of all time. You could have the arguments, So I hate that'll bother me with any team sport, and I think, but it's especially prudent in hockey, as we see. Everyone will criticize the individual, but as soon as they win, it's the team and all that stuff. And I also think, going back to Crosby and LeBron, Marcus, I do think it also has to do with the nature of both. Crosby is a very soft-spoken individual. I think that definitely has something to do with it compared to LeBron.
Well, LeBron's only really become comfortable with his, quote unquote self. He's been outspoken, but not really about himself and how good he is until very recently. Like it's really in the last 2 years when he said the things like, look, if I'm playing, my team has a shot to win any given night.
I'm jumping into this. I have the NHL Network on right now, and they're going into this. They're going over the offsides call.
Well, we didn't really discuss it ad nauseum. You want to use that as a segue to talk about the offside call?
Yeah, because we could debate cultural relevance in sports for the rest of eternity here. We'll jump into the offsides. What initial reaction?
Well, I didn't even realize because I was watching on the train and I wasn't paying attention, so I couldn't go back in my phone and keep that on and then go to tweet. So I had to close it, and then I was tweeting my PK Subban snark about him having more goals than Montreal in the Stanley Cup Final since 93-94. And then Cole, one of our own, who we should get on, regardless of the result of the final, we should get on. We should have Cole on to help us, give a little autopsy there of what happened and what went right and what went wrong. So then, I was like half paying attention on Twitter, half watching, half on the train. And then it wasn't until like the second period when I was on Twitter and someone zoomed in on the image and they're like, how can you tell that his foot is lifted? How can you tell that his foot is up? I didn't think it was nearly as decisive as the officials made it. I think there was enough wiggle room there where you had to keep the goal.
That was my problem. I think that's my argument here. That was so close. That is so
it was not
tough.
conclusive.
No. So if it had been ruled off, granted you can't, but in theory, had it been ruled off sides, like I wouldn't have argued it. But because it was ruled onside, then I'd be kind of pissed off about it.
Yeah.
And so tough.
And I think especially frustrating too. There was a change of possession on that play. Like
you get into the replay, and I'm a fan of it. I think you get the call right, but do you have a limit to where it is? Because they had exactly, and they were in the zone for a little while before the goal even was relevant.
I think if you lose control of the puck, I think that's a reset, and you cannot then challenge. You can't then challenge. Had Pittsburgh been pinned in their own end and had not touched the puck the whole time, sure. But once the puck changes hands, I think, at that point on an offside call, I don't think it should be reviewable.
It's tough. It's really tough. And I get it. I'm a fan of replay. I really am getting the calls right. But I don't know. There's just
in instances like this, are you really getting it right, or are you just emphasizing how much uncertainty in this process there really is? I didn't think there was anything certain about that replay last night.
No, it was that close. I mean, it's so. It's tough also when the runner of the blade of the skate is white and the blade is
right.
Alex. So it's blending on the white ice. And that makes it even. It's almost like an optical illusion in that sense. It is really so tough here. Another rule, Marcus, is delay of game the stupidest rule in the sport.
Oh, I was gonna tag
delay you. Game, the dumbest freaking rule in sports. I'm
not just saying that because it was PK who got.
No, it's just I've been saying this. Go through my Twitter. I've been saying this for years. God, it's infuriating.
Because you see the replay of the Exmo and the puck rolls up on him, and I'm just immediately thinking this is why Conall doesn't want the rule. These guys, 90% of the time, I'd say they're not trying to clear it out of.
I'd say 95% of the time. I mean, God almighty. It's just such a ridiculous rule. Once again, make it, and you know what, I guess I'm going to give a shout out to the ECRHA for actually getting a rule right, because it's a rule in there. If you shoot it out of play, you just can't change. That's just make it like an icing. You cannot change. If a guy, that should be the rule. I mean, come on.
I think it's easy.
It's ridiculous.
But Gary Bettman gave his State of the League press conference yesterday, and he said this is before the game. He's like, oh yeah, replays worked out just as well as we'd imagined this season.
Yeah, of course. I know. I saw that quote.
Which I mean, classic. Undone. And I think that's a rule that should be, reconsidered. I think just getting rid of change treat it like icing, man.
You know what? I'm gonna use that as an argument in favor of what we believe. Once again, kids, that's another reason that shooting of the puck off the glass shouldn't be your resort there. All right, try to make a pass and skate it out. All right, because now you're gonna get a penalty.
Well, maybe that's the methodology. Maybe they want to discourage teams from chipping the puck off the boards, but discouraging NHL coaches.
If that was it. If they came out and said that, I completely changed my opinion.
If nothing will discourage NHL coaches from chipping and changing. Nothing.
Hard off the glass, boys. Listen, once again, it's but even there, PK had some space. I thought he could have easily made a play, and then it just started rolling, and he's just like,
And you can see it in his face too the moment it happened.
No,
Yeah.
just God Almighty.
And then Nashville scored right after that move by Austin Watson. What terrible defense from the Penguins from Oli Mata and Trevor Daley.
I like Oli Mata, but he's had a rough playoff.
3 years.
Yeah, maybe it's bigger than that, but man, I know he got sick and all that stuff, and there's a lot of issues there, but I don't know if he's really ever truly recovered here.
He's not lived up to his hype in recent memory.
No, he certainly hasn't here, Marcus. It's going to be fun. But listen, I'm excited. Game 2 is tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night, yep. Wednesday night.
Wednesday. I'm also good. Thank God the NHL has fixed it and actually has these games on NBC and on NBC Sports because
tomorrow's on NBC Sports.
Oh, is it? Okay, good. Then I take back every word I just said.
Tomorrow they go game 1 NBC, game 2 and 3 NBC Sports, and then the rest are on NBC. Why they're not all just on NBC, I don't get. I think it's a ratings play. They want people to watch the cable network. That being said, I don't know what's stopping them from simulcasting it.
Yeah, come on, bro. Get it together, would you? Jesus, God.
Or treat it like ESPN does the national championship. Have one feed on NBC, and then on NBC Sports, have your little experimental feed.
Yeah, that'd be a smart idea. But that's too much. That's too much thinking for the NHL right now. I don't know.
Well, I could see NBC experimenting with it. I could also see the NHL kiboshing it.
That's probably true.
They're like, no, we don't want to. We don't want to do this. We don't want to make it easier and more enjoyable for our fans.
Marcus, I'm going to give a little shout out to everybody. All right, so for those who don't know, I am going to be in Nashville for Game 3 Saturday night. Because this is not a Ranger game or anything that I'm emotionally invested in that much. My goal is to somehow get on TV, I think I've decided. Now, whether that is smashing the car afterwards or I'm going to see if I can win a karaoke contest or something like that, or just being crazy if we are able to get tickets to the game. So please keep an eye out. I'm probably rocking. If not, although there's always the chance that I have too much to drink and decide, I'm buying a PK Subban jersey, and then it goes $200. So maybe I'll be decked out. Who knows? But at the very least, I'll have some Predators gear on there. Devils insider Kevin Stanley will be joining us, as well as our friend Steve. So I am beyond excited for this. Marcus, I forget, did you get to cover any of the Stanley Cup games last year?
I did not.
So, okay. I'll say this will be this is a little fun trivia for this. Will be my third ever time if I am able to go to a Stanley Cup game. Obviously, I was at Game 4 of 2014 when the Rangers actually won their lone game of that series, and it was the worst game they played all series. Who would have thought?
Classic.
And then I was also at, fun fact, I want to confirm which game I was at. 2001 Devils Avalanche.
Wow.
I know. This is crazy.
That's cool.
I know. So, fun fact about this story before we wrap up the show here is I went to that game. We had been living in New Jersey for a little over a year, and it was my first year we moved back to New Jersey. Both my parents are from New York, though, so I was always a Ranger fan. But my mom had actually bought me a Devils shirt to wear to the Stanley Cup Finals. And she's like, you're going. Dad's got tickets from his friends from work. They're like Devils tickets. We were 5 rows off the ice. We had these insane seats, okay? I'm going to tell you what game I was at. Hold on. I was at Game 3. So wow, Marcus, this is trippy. May 31st, 2001. So almost 16 years ago to the day, I was at the old Continental Airlines Arena. The Avalanche won 3-1 in that game. But I had his Devils Eastern Conference shirt on, and I actually snuck a permanent marker into my car, and I crossed it all out. And I was just wearing a shirt that had black scribble all over it. So, yes, folks, I was always a pain in the ass, and I always will be. So keep an eye on me 16 years later.
I was going to say before we go, should we, because I'm sure we'll get into this in the off season. Should we give the listeners a preview of your rants to come on Alain Vigneault when we really, preview and discuss the off season? I'm going to give you a minute. I'm going to have a stopwatch, and I'm going to give you a minute to not profanely, but just rip in to
Alain Vigneault. Or should we tease that? I think we should tease it and let me just. Next show, off season after the cup, after we'll do our cup review, get into the expansion draft and stuff, and then I'll just come in hot takes.
Can we give them 30 seconds? But no more.
What? So you just want me to rip Alain Vigneault or the Rangers management in general? Just
anything for 30 seconds. I will time you
Okay. I wish we had the technology to put the timer on the screen.
We should. I could try and screen share and set up a timer. Hold on, let me look into that technology.
Marcus wants to hear this, folks, because we didn't get a chance to go over the Rangers Ottawa series.
We did not get a chance.
Marcus wants to hear how angry I am.
I do. I really do. All right, so let me try and do some screen sharing here.
I'd be impressed.
Is this working? Oh yes, we can see it. Okay. Can you see the timer, Conall?
I can see the timer. Okay, awesome. Ready?
All right, so I'm going to start, and then at 30, I'm going to stop it.
Okay.
And we're going to have this going at the same time. Are you ready?
All right, you count it down for me.
3, 2, 1, you're off.
Okay, the Rangers-Ottawa series was the single-handedly worst coach series I've ever seen by a professional coach, okay? Absolutely abysmal. The series should have been won in 5 games from the Rangers. Instead, you got this clown behind the bench who consistently puts out Mark Stahl and Nick Holden in every pressure situation. He got away with it in Montreal in Game 2, yet he continues to do it over and over again. If those 2 guys on the roster with Jan Girardi and Kevin Klein next season, the Rangers are done. They're never going to win. Trade Lundqvist to a team that's going to win. God!
Wow. All in 30 seconds, folks.
I like your backgrounds.
All in 30 seconds. He did it all in 30 seconds. And that's just a tease. There's more of that coming.
We're going to go hot take rants here, Marcus. Marcus, maybe if you're available, we could check in next week, maybe after Game 4 or something like that. I'll give you my natural review, and then we can hopefully maybe I would listen. Wouldn't surprise me if the series is tied up 2-2 going into the final 3 games. We could break down the series, maybe split it in half.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm down for it, folks. Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think? Next Tuesday?
Saturday would be Game 3. Monday would be Game 4. So maybe we aim for a week from today and see if we can.
Let me look at the schedule, folks. We're planning our show on the air for all 6 of the listeners. Tuesday. Monday's Game 4, so let's do Tuesday, and then Game 5 not until June 8th.
Spreading it out here, NHL.
Not until June 11th. 3 days in between games 4, 5, and games 5, 6, and 7. How about that?
Yeah, I think it's a conspiracy to get Chris Letang back in the lineup.
Oh my God!
I just don't have hot takes. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
Usually, Penguins writers have anti-Penguins conspiracies, not pro-Penguins conspiracies. But on that conspiratorial note, thank you as always for tuning in. You can find us on YouTube, youtube.com/thepuckleheads, facebook.com/thepuckleheads. and twitter.com/thepuckleheads. All our shows for the past year, probably like 10 of them are on YouTube. Twitter, we could use more Twitter followers. Same with Facebook likes. So yeah, please do that. Conall, you have anything to add?
Yeah, folks, once again, keep an eye out for the crazy redhead in Nashville. We'll see what happens. I will not confirm or deny that I'm sneaking a catfish into the arena.
He is not confirming nor denying. On that note, folks, have a great night.